You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel Kudlak, one of the hosts of the podcast, and today I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Good afternoon. It's so lovely to be here today and really excited to talk to our next guest. I just had the chance to meet them, but haven't really had a chance to get into some conversation, so I'm excited, Rachel, to get started today.
Yes, so am I. We don't always have two guests on, but today we're again lucky and we have two special folks on. But first, let me just give a quick shout out to today's podcast sponsor. So today's podcast is powered by the Cunningham Law Firm. Located in Phoenix, Arizona, and helping clients nationwide, the Cunningham Law Firm specializes in personal injury, wrongful death, and burn-related cases. And you can learn more about them by visiting cunninghamlawfirm.com. And our first guest today knows, and he should know, all about the Cunningham Law Firm because we are being joined by Matt Cunningham. He is a trial attorney who has been handling burn injury cases for over 25 years. He is recognized as one of the top burn injury lawyers in the United States. He is the owner and president of the Cunningham Law Firm, which is recognized as America's top burn injury law firm. Since 1996, Matt and the Cunningham Law Firm have represented over 124 clients involving burn-related injuries. Matt and the Cunningham Law Firm are recognized as true advocates on behalf of burn survivors, their families, and generously support the work of burn foundations and Phoenix Society across the United States. Matt is recognized as one of the top 100 trial lawyers by National Trial Lawyers Association, Best Lawyers of America, Elite Lawyers of America, and Arizona's Finest Lawyers. So that was just a little snippet of his bio. He has, a wealth of knowledge and expertise. So you can find his full bio in our show notes as well.
Thank you so much. And the most important person today, he's next.
Yes. So we also have on Jason Nelson, who is a Phoenix, Arizona native and experienced a life-altering event on February 9th, 2014. A natural gas explosion in a rental home he owned left him with a staggering 80% TVSA burn. The trauma was immense, but Jason's resilience shone through. After enduring countless surgeries, enduring grueling therapy sessions, and navigating the long road to recovery, Jason found a purpose beyond his own healing. Driven by a deep-seated desire to give back to the organizations and individuals who supported him throughout his ordeal, he's dedicated his life to advocating for burn survivors. So thank you so much, Jason and Matt, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. Jason, I understand that Rachel talked a little bit about your burn injury, but to get started, can you tell us a little bit about what happened in that 2014 explosion in your own words? We always like to ask our survivors to kind of give us their own story.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to share it. So back in early 2014, I was in a rental house I owned in Gilbert, which is just a suburb of Phoenix. And my tenant had moved out, so I was there doing some maintenance, some painting, just some repair. And about 3:00, my wife had just left the house. She had stopped by to give me some lunch, and so she had just left. So I decided to step out in the garage and smoke a cigarette. So I stepped out there and. That's kind of where it started. I lit the cigarette, and there was an explosion in the garage that I had no idea where it came from. I actually thought my hair was on fire. I thought the lighter had ignited my hair. I panicked. ran into the garage door trying to get out. Couldn't get out that way, so I ended up running back through the house, and there was a guy standing there. He had actually heard me hit the garage door so loud it echoed down the street, and he was there as soon as I came out with 911 on the call or on the phone. I remember all of it. The pain. I remember, kind of screaming for the time, or my wife at the time. And luckily he was there. I remember the ambulance coming down the street. He got me out into the ambulance. They shot me up with whatever drug it was, and that's the last thing I remember is walking into the ambulance and sitting down. That was February 9th, 2014, and then my next kind of recollection isn't until the end of May, when I knew I had been burned, and I knew there was what had caused the accident. So.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. And we'll definitely dive a little bit more into, your hospital stay and your injuries. But Matt, I kind of want to jump to you for a second. And, I already know, but why don't you tell our listeners kind of how you got connected with Jason and his burn case, and how soon after, that gas explosion were you contacted?
So I just wanted to, because we do have some photos, 1 week before Jason was injured, he was one of the top Spartan race. This is of his family. You can see him with a medal on his neck. He had just finished a competition in one of these Tough Mudder and Spartan races. So elite athlete, really, really loved, physical fitness. So to be 80% burned, to say life-changing, life-altering is, the words don't do it justice. So his family's from Minnesota, and you can see his father, Dan, there, and his mother, Debbie, and then that's his sister with her kids and husband, and his son, Colin. So Jason's son, Colin. So, after this happened, there were a lot of questions, and fortunate enough, his parents reached out to me, and it's really, really critical and really important with these injuries. They're so catastrophic. They're so life-changing. Most of them are lifelong. They're very expensive injuries. So it's important that we hold who caused this accountable and make them provide the compensation to make sure the person has the optimum care, and it's a milieu of damages. It's pain, suffering, disfigurement, loss of employment, loss of income. It's the medical bills are astronomical. It's a very, very expensive injury. So thank God his parents contacted us early on. And if you think of a case, it really is like building a building. And there's a case like this, there's two aspects: the liability, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And who's responsible for it? So that's the initial phase. And what's so critical in the beginning is to preserve the evidence. And that's why it's important for folks to contact us early when these tragedies occur. We do this investigation at no charge and make sure that the evidence is preserved. And then the second part of the case is damages, which I'll discuss later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, the medical bills alone, regardless of really how large a burn injury is, those expenses and the time off of work, it's, if a lot of folks, unfortunately, we'll dive into this, don't realize that they may have a case in front of them. So Matt, maybe you can talk a little bit too of, why getting connected so early on is so important.
Well, sadly, we've seen a lot of cases where people will call and I'll say, let's take a defective product that blows up. Do you have the product? And without the product, you really can't make the case. So the burden is on the injured party to prove either the product was defective or the entity or the person was negligent. There's a really sad story here. There was a young girl And again, you really want to go with someone who's specialized and handles burn injury cases, because unfortunately in my profession, not everyone is willing to, do what's necessary to make sure the person realizes the optimum recovery. And why is that so important? So many of the adjunct care, I think Jason can tell you, he uses a lot of massage therapy. He's extensively scarred. And, with equine therapy and music therapy and different things that insurance companies won't pay for. So I'll just tell you a quick story. Dan Caruso was the director of the burn hospital, and Caruso was talking to a group of doctors one time, and he said, I know it's not popular to say, because most of us don't like lawyers, but who constitutes the burn team? For sure, the first responders do, because they provide the person with the opportunity for life. For sure, the hospital setting, we optimize their recovery, make sure they recover. So the therapist, the psychologist, everyone in that hospital setting does their best to try to heal that person physically and emotionally. But the fact of the matter is, this is a very expensive injury. And who's going to address the financial side? So I'm blessed that, I got to know Dan Caruso, and I got involved in the burn community. Probably 98 and 2000 is when, I started. I had a life-changing case that the man was like Jason. It was so inspirational. I said, this is what I want to do for my career. I want to be part of this burn community. I want to help burn survivors and their families. So that's the reality. And Dan Caruso was Jason's doctor. And I think Jason can probably tell you what a phenomenal patient advocate, strongest patient advocate physician I've ever met in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. He always did what was right for the burn patient and to make the best outcome possible. He was the quarterback. He advocated and ensured the best outcome you could possibly have.
Mm-hmm. Jason, is it possible for you to walk us through a little bit about the types of injuries that you face and kind of that hospital stay? So right after your kind of injury occurred. I know we showed the pictures of you kind of as that athlete and kind of going through, but can you explain a little bit more? And I'd imagine to hear you say that you hit the garage as hard as you did, there were probably more injuries beyond just like the burn injuries themselves. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think Matt had mentioned I was an 80% burn. At the time of the explosion, I had only a pair of shorts on and a pair of shoes. Nothing below my knees and nothing above the waist. So when the explosion happened, my back really caught the brunt of it, and ended up with third-degree burns, covering really 60% of my body. The other 20% was all second-degree burns. So they were severe. My back, my arms, my legs. I was burned from head to toe. I think back and, I was probably 95 pounds during my, when I ran Spartan races. And I think I was down to 155 pounds at one point in my recovery. And the doctor, said, just, advocated for me and said, do what you got to do to eat, whatever it is, whatever you want to eat, just eat, because you need to put weight on. But that was something they looked out for me. It wasn't just about let's heal this guy's wounds and get him out of the hospital and move him along. It was about returning me to who I was before, before the third-degree burns, before the skin grafts, before the therapy, before the PT and OT. I mean, that was their goal.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, how long? I know you said the first thing you remember was then in May. So how long was your total hospital stay, or at least that initial hospital stay?
Yeah, so I had two hospital stays actually. My burn injuries occurred February 9th. It's funny, I remember this, I talked about it yesterday, is I actually was discharged on July 4th of the same year, so July 4th, 2014, into an inpatient rehab. So I spent a few weeks at inpatient rehab and had a setback and was diagnosed with MRSA. So ate most of my grafts, destroyed a lot of the work that had been done. So I went back to the hospital again, and really didn't check out, till early October. Was kind of that time I was left to go home. I was stable enough. I had a couple open wounds, but nothing the hospital needed to handle any longer.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, when were you introduced to Jason? Was he still in the hospital? And I guess, like, how does that timeline all work out when you have a patient who obviously Jason's first priority is getting better and being able to go home from the hospital, but obviously time is of the essence. So can you just kind of talk us through a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Taking it in order. So, in situations like this, the entire family unit is in the middle of the ocean of despair. And Jason, with the extent of his burns, I was told, had a 11% chance of survival. So the whole focus in the beginning was, is he going to live? And at that point, Jason, as many extensively burned survivors know, you're in a drug-induced coma. So it's up to a family member to be navigating the ship. And Jason was surrounded by a phenomenal family. His wife, Tammy, who at the time, Jason was your girlfriend, right? And then parents, and his son was really young, so it was really, really hard on his son to know that what his dad was going through. So someone makes that decision to say, we need to know how and why this happened, and to employ someone who specialized in burn injury cases. We then say to that family, the most important thing right now is for you to be at your loved one's bedside. Whatever we can do to facilitate that. So on the legal side of things, just know you're in good hands. We're investigating. We're going to make sure the evidence is preserved. We'll make sure the questions are answered, how or why this happened and who's responsible for it. So that's the focus in the beginning. So I think, Jason's parents had to move out, and we assisted them in making sure they could get out of Minnesota. But there's a multitude of needs. And I think the first and foremost, most important part at that time is that family needs to be at the person's bedside. I really believe, and Tammy, Jason, they ultimately got married. She said the only part I could rub or touch on Jason was the bottom of his feet. But I believe in that drug-induced coma, that love in the room is assisting in their healing. Jason's case was really unique because his neighborhood was not served by gas. It should have never happened. No one knew that there were gas lines running in his neighborhood. All those homes functioned off electricity. But by being there and getting there early, because all the public officials and authorities, they've already started the investigation, the family has to have a representative there to make sure that we know what is being investigated and to make sure the evidence is preserved. And that's what we did in the beginning. And then when Jason finally got out of his drug-induced coma, so I think I'm finally getting your question, it was one of the most impactful things I'd ever seen. He really, and Jason, you can take over the story, but he didn't want to live like this. And so there was a burn survivor named, and I don't know if Jason, you remember it, but that I represent, a young girl named Whitney Alderson. And I asked her to go in, and it was really touching and powerful to encourage Jason, take each day at a time. don't give up. And I promise you life's going to get better. So I don't know, Jason, you fill in on that one?
Yeah, she came to visit. I didn't want her to visit. I think a lot of burn survivors feel that way in the beginning. And I refused multiple burn survivors to come visit. And it just took the right push. It was the right day at the right time. And everything she told me is true. I look back today and it's the same advice I think we give, new burn survivors. Take it a day at a time, step by step. It's sometimes a long process, to get back to where you want to be as a person again, and I think, having someone like Matt in your corner, and the doctors in your corner allows you to focus on other things that are important to your healing. For me, it's hiking. That's therapeutic for me. I love to get out and hike. But that allows things like that to happen down the road when everything is, taken care of in the beginning. You don't have to worry about it.
Definitely. Well, so as you're getting out of the hospital, I'm sure you're still having surgeries, going to therapy. Matt and his team are working on the case. Can you, maybe from both of your perspectives, I guess, just talk more about the case in general, how you knew you had something, kind of how you, Matt, prepared Jason for the case, along with his family. Just kind of walk us through some of those logistics, because honestly, I don't know a ton of the behind the scenes of what really kind of goes into a burn injury case.
Well, Jason, I'll go first, because this is an expert intensive type case. So you ask yourself, why did the pipe leak? Well, the people that got to answer that have to analyze the pipe from a scientific level. So we employed PhD level polymer scientists who, because this particular pipe, there's articles that this type of pipe should last 100 years, at a minimum 50. And this pipe had failed prematurely. So the question then becomes why? And so what's required is, you got to hire, it's like putting together an orchestra. I need a violinist. I need a cello player. So you know what type of experts you need, right? So you go out and get the very best experts in the United States who can answer the how and the why and who's responsible. The other thing we did in Jason's case is we wanted to know, when did they know, what did they know, and when did they know it? And we wanted to analyze how big was this gas plume in his neighborhood, because we could look at the size of there was 2 slits in the pipe. What was the extent of the leak? And then measure this gas plume that was underground. And so what was the likely period of time that this existed? So how and why wasn't this discovered earlier? So we did all that, fully prepared the liability side of the case. And then the biggest part, I think, from a client's perspective, probably the most important expert is a life care planner who meets with the physicians and the doctors and the therapist and really projects out what are your future needs that are likely. And then there's cost assigned to that. So on the medical, that person knows all the CPT codes, and no case can get resolved unless you can look at the client and say, I know you are taken care of. And so we had 2 mediations in Jason's case. And, fortunately, we were able to get the case resolved. Unfortunately, it's subject to confidentiality, so I can't share any particulars of that. But I can just say that we reached that point where I was able to look at Jason and his family, because his son, for the change in the relationship, with what Dad went through, he had a claim. His parents had a claim as well. But I could say I know you are taken care of. And when we reached that point, the case got resolved. But Jason takes it from there. So then the survivor story kicks in. I mean, this has been a long journey. We're talking 8 years, but I've now sat in the bleachers in the stands and watched with such admiration. I'm so proud and happy to have represented Jason and his family. He is one of the most exceptional human beings I've ever met.
That's awesome. Well, Jason, I definitely want to hear from you too of kind of your experience going through the case. Like, I'm sure, without a case, a burn injury it's very emotional and mental, and that recovery, let alone when you kind of have a case and all of this other, just it's a brand new world for you after your burn injury. So can you talk us through a little bit of just your experience going through it?
Yeah. So my experience was trying to think of the right word. I think optimal. I had all the right pieces fell into place. I had a family, both locally and my girlfriend, children, extended family from Minnesota that all picked up their lives and moved to Arizona, to ensure I had the best outcome. I firmly believe I have the best doctors in the world taking care of me. And the thing I didn't have to stress about was what was happening on the legal end. I've got one of the best, if not the best, lawyers in the country fighting for me, fighting for what I need to have the best recovery. It truly was a team effort in every aspect. I think big burn injuries are like that. You need an entire team advocating for the survivor, to get their life back, and whatever that looks like, once they're healed up. Sometimes it's 5 years. I can share with you that it's been 10 years for me, and I still have to go back to therapy sometimes. It's a process that takes time. But when you have the right people representing you, the journey is still difficult because it's your recovery, but you've got people fighting for you, which makes it even better.
So
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, in so many of these cases, eventually safety follows. And so in Jason's case, after that, and there are, we do have responsible corporate citizens in the United States, and nobody wants to see someone injured or wrongfully killed. And this particular company, after Jason's case, then instituted safety and said everywhere, they called it a dead end system. So everywhere where, like in Jason Street, the pipe just ended, right? It didn't float anywhere, but they decided that everywhere there's these dead end systems and this particular pipe is encountered, we're going to remove it. So that's been, a huge, tremendous undertaking and expense, because we're talking probably thousands and thousands of miles of this. So, we can point to that over and over again, that and then, that's the other aspect. So the responsible party steps up. The injured person receives the appropriate compensation. And there's no dollar amount. I guarantee you, Jason would sit here and say, I would love to be back, and doing my Spartan races and whatever. I don't want it, but it's a crummy card. And you're dealt a crummy card. And I earlier told Rachel, there's a lot, people suffer loss. And unfortunately, sadly, some people's crosses are a lot heavier than others. And why did I become a lawyer? I honestly want to be able to lessen the weight of that person's cross. And I believe the financial side, we can do it on the money side. That's not everything, right? Like Jason said, love a family, it takes a community, it takes a village. But it's an important part. And anyways, so we see, that in Jason's case, safety was implemented, but we've seen that in many other cases too, that, we can look at glass fireplace doors. Now if it's 172 and little children were burning their hands, there has to be a barrier there. We had another case where there were gas lines in a sewer lateral, so thousands of miles of video camera. There was well over 100 intersections, and so tragedies were averted there. We've had oven tip overs with little babies getting up on doors, and in the early 90s, all the manufacturers started selling oven ranges with anti-tip brackets. So in a multi-housing or a leased housing place, they're required to make sure they have an anti-tip bracket. So, from the case, person gets compensated. The doctors, in the hospitals, they have lien rights and they get reimbursed, not at their capitated rate, but at their full rate. So they get reimbursed. And then, like I said, safety comes about. So, I just think it's important. It's important for the community, and just I think there's only two sides of the coin. You've suffered these horrible injuries. Question whether you can go back to work or not. You have a mortgage payment, you have a car payment, you have a family to support. The person who was responsible for this should pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
I guess
I know what helped me, and helping other burn survivors. I think time is of the essence. That's usually the most important thing. And I was in a state, 6 weeks in a medically induced coma. I wasn't making decisions about my life. It was someone else making decisions. But I want the best making the decisions. So I think time, in a lot of these cases, after the injury is important to reach out to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question for both of you would probably be a little bit about, like, why should I contact a lawyer, right? Or do I think sometimes the first question is like, do I have a case? But then the second question, there's a lot involved, right? And can't necessarily sugarcoat it, right, Matt? But it can be very exhausting, right? It can be a lot to go through in addition to the injury. What would you say? And I'll ask the same, for both of you, because I think it's probably a different answer, right? For Jason, maybe than you, Matt. Why would I want to contact a lawyer in this case? And if I have one, right? Obviously we've touched on a couple of those topics, right? Family and whatnot, but what are the reasons that you think it should happen?
Who wants to go first? You, me, or you, Jason?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So, these injuries are so catastrophic. I'm sure, many listeners, I've been to a lot of world burns and been part of it. It's so inspiring, the strength and resiliency of survivors and the human spirit. So I'm so fortunate to see those stories play out. But just on the medical care, the insurance companies, they only want to pay for what they deem medically necessary. So there is a lot of ancillary care or additional care that a person could receive that it helps them to optimize their recovery. So when the monies are obtained, that source of funds becomes available. I know Jason, like I mentioned earlier, I think he does the massage therapy. But we've had clients that they had fingers amputated, and they went on to play multiple musical instruments. So I just think when you do the music therapy, the equine therapy, but in a situation where all you have is insurance, you're just going to get what they deem medically necessary. And there's always this overlap with burn injuries. Is it cosmesis or is it medically necessary? We've had, and now I think they're getting better, but for years we had them deny they were denying laser treatments. We even had insurance companies deny someone with web space releases. So just from the treatment standpoint, if, and again, I think it's important to hold whoever caused this accountable. And the injuries are so significant, and it does soften that person's walk. They do have the opportunity now to pursue the kind of life they want without worrying about mortgage payments and car payments and all that. And then it does lead, hopefully, in a lot of cases, to safety. But that's, in my world, in my situation of doing burn cases for 25 years, I can point to so many clients that I am so happy that I allowed them the opportunity to move forward as best they can, to realize their optimum recovery. And they are paying it forward. They are helping other burn survivors. They are charitable. They are assisting and making their communities better. They've gone on to live some exceptional lives. And Jason's a tremendous example of that. Story after story where he hears about burn survivors, he goes out and helps them. So they pay it forward. And Jason, in the beginning of this program, talked about purpose to his life. And that's the spirit of a burn survivor. It's like, yeah, this was a crummy card. I wish it never happened, but I got to somehow put purpose and meaning to my suffering. And I see those stories play out, and I've seen it play out in Jason's life. And I'll let Jason jump in to how's he living his life. I mean, he does so much work at our local burn foundation here, and he helps burn survivors. So I think given the outcome of Jason's case, it's given him the freedom and the ability to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the word that comes to mind is freedom. To pursue, therapies that work for me. The mental recovery from a burn injury, I think, in my opinion, is just as hard, if not harder, than the physical recovery. Your life has done a complete 180, from what it was on February 8th to what it is on February 9th. My life is completely different. And it's not always it's not always your fault. Sometimes there's someone else that's responsible for your injury, whether it's a car accident, a smoke alarm not working, in my instance, a gas line that's leaking. It's important. Like I said about the time, but it gives you freedom to pursue your best way possible.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And Matt, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit. Obviously, you specialize and have experience working with burn injury cases, but maybe I know you can help clients nationwide, but maybe someone's not close to you or you can't serve them in that state or something like that. Why is it important that someone finds a lawyer, an attorney that has that experience?
Well, we do handle cases across the United States. We just finished one. I'm in Arizona. This is where I'm actually licensed, but we just finished one in Cook County, Illinois. I just think it's important when someone is making that decision. I think they do need to ask, how many burn-related cases have you handled? What have been the outcomes of those cases? And we're very connected with foundations. We love the Phoenix Society. We're connected with foundations. We support, because where I really focus, my contributions, and where I can help foundations is in the family support services, because I've seen over and over again at that acute phase of the injury, for the foundations to be able to be that life raft like I said, in the middle of the ocean of despair, and take this, the survivor and their families and from that ocean and get them to the beach during that acute phase. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but we're a resource, however we can help. And if you are looking for someone to answer your questions, we'd be more than happy to. But at the same time, if you have someone who, you've employed, I think it's important to ask them how much they've had in the way of burn injury cases, what has been their success. And I have a real issue with some of the attorney's fees, honestly. You hear these stories because we get paid in the event that we have a successful resolution of the case. All the development costs, all the costs, those experts are really expensive. So the whole investigative, that's all on us. We never, ever will charge the client. So ultimately, we will get a contingent fee if we're successful. I keep hearing some of these lawyers across the United States charging fees that at the end of the day, it is the client you have to take care of. It is their life. You got these lawyers that will say, well, I got my check and we're good, we're out. That's not it. Not only do we make sure that, like I said, you look at the client and say, I know you're taking care of all your future forecasted needs. We've got funds for it. But, a lot of times people haven't come from much money. So we'll structure that case in a way so that money is paid to them until they take their last breath on this earth. That money is then, they got financial plan. We put them with all the right people, planners. If they're going to buy a house, we can recommend the realtor. We want every single aspect that now is going to increase the quality of their life, that we're going to put them in contact with the right people. So I think the difference, and I'll just finish with this. Honestly, I look at Jason, I look at our clients, and I'll tell them this all the time. I will treat you no different than if you're a member of my family. So, all the decisions we make, the resources we expend, the energy we expend, the effort, it's no different than if they were my brother, my sister, or, a close relative. So I encourage, if someone thinks they have a case, we'd be more than happy to talk to them. I think one of the things that I think Jason would express, and I would express, what's really important is that initial phase of the injury. Do not let the evidence get thrown out. Let us analyze it. There's no cost to anyone for that. Let us we'll get a product. We'll send it to whoever the guru is in the United States for that particular product. And we'll say, is this defective? So if someone needs help in that regard, I think it's an important aspect to make sure that, like we said, whoever caused this is held responsible.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, to the families, not to the burn survivor, they're dealing with their own things, but you don't know what you don't know. I think if my parents didn't reach out to Matt when they did, that I'm probably not sitting here today talking to you, that my life is different because of what Matt and lawyers like him do for burn survivors. It's a weight and a burden off a tough recovery already.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, I want to pull up one of these photos here as well. I don't know if Jason, you just kind of want to talk to us a little bit of maybe what this photo represents or how you were kind of feeling in this moment. So yeah, just kind of.
Yeah, that's the day we settled everything, and the judge approved our settlement. But it's me, I think we resolved our case in 2015. So I was fresh out of the hospital. I was still in recovery. But it's freedom to do what I need to recover. And if it's mental therapy, I did hyperbaric therapy, I did extra OT, I did surgeries that I think most insurance companies would deny. That it gave me the freedom to do those things. So it's a very proud day.
Definitely. And I know you talked a little bit of, the different therapies and things like that you were able to try, but truly, how do you think your life would be different if you never met Matt?
Wow. That's a tough one. I believe everything is connected. And my group of people that I cherish and adore are all related to my burn injury. From doctors to lawyers to burn survivors to my family to my friends. It revolves around that injury, and I think to not have those people in my life, it wouldn't be the same. The level of happiness wouldn't be the same. So, I guess that's my answer.
Love that.
Can I just jump in? I didn't suffer what Jason did, and I watched it, and I've seen, the pictures, and so many survivors, you suffered at a level that no one can comprehend. But if there is a rainbow, there is. In this story, there is a rainbow. Jason has the most beautiful family. He's gone on to do so many great things for survivors. Him and 8 burn survivors in 2022 to inspire other people who have loss and challenges. They summited Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,300 feet. They made a documentary of that called Courage Rising. And there's a scene there, I saw the premiere, but then it just recently went out to a streaming company called Kino, and I encourage everyone to watch it. It is impactful and it is powerful. But Jason has a scene where he says, when I was in that hospital, never did I think that I would be here climbing Kilimanjaro. And really, I am so blessed and fortunate to have been on this journey with Jason. It's a journey of healing, but he's at a point where he's helping others so much. And, we talk about it's a village, it's a community, it's people along the way. But Jason, just himself and his spirit and his strength, he's just one of those special human beings. It's horrible what he went through, but he has used his suffering in a way to help many, many other people.
Yeah, no one should have this.
And we'll make sure to we'll have the link to Courage Rising in our show notes too for folks who want to check that out.
Cool. Thank you.
So we heard a little bit about how you spend your time now. It sounds like you did climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is super exciting. But tell us a little bit more about your life today.
So, it's that word again, freedom. I use my time to give back to burn survivors. I currently sit on the board of a nonprofit that supports burn survivors. So I use my influence and experience as a burn survivor to direct and help the next generation of burn survivors. The survivor that's in the hospital today, who's wondering, what's my life going to look like? That's my focus, is to make sure that they have everything they need to have a great recovery. So that takes quite a bit of my time. And besides that, I like to travel. I like to hike. It's therapeutic for me to get out and enjoy nature and I think burn survivors, at least I can speak for myself, struggle with purpose and, what's my life? Who am I now? I'm not the same as I was before. And hiking for me gets me back to who I was before. That's what I enjoyed before my accident. And that's what I enjoy after my accident. So I'm blessed for sure.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I know we are coming up on time here, so we do want to ask you our final partner questions. Well, in our ending questions that we ask everyone that comes on the podcast, and so we thank you for joining us today. But Jason, we're going to ask you the first question. What is one thing that you want the world to know about being a burn survivor? And we've talked a lot about the journey today. But is there something that maybe you didn't know before your injury? I know there's lots that I didn't know before mine that now you think it's important other survivors or even just the general community around us knows.
Yeah, there's a lot actually. I don't know if we have another hour, but we could maybe talk for that. I guess what I want other burn survivors to know is a burn injury, regardless of size, small, large, in between, whatever it is, it's a bump in the road. It's not who you're going to be the rest of your life. It's the situation you're in isn't always what it's going to be. And this is just one of those seasons, a burn injury doesn't have to mean you don't have purpose and you don't get to do what you want to do. It's just that fork in the road that puts you on another direction. And that direction, is rewarding in a lot of aspects.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I heard the phrase the other day, you don't get over it, you get through it. And I feel like that kind of sums up to what you're just saying, that it's just part of the journey and you can make it through it.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, I mean, every year my journey was different. I'm coming up, I'm after 10 years now, and it's I can look back at every year of my journey, and think what it was about at that time. And it's different, and it's changed every year. And I think it'll change in 10 years from now, that I'll look back at this time in my life and, maybe it's a big part of my life. Maybe it's just a chapter in the story.
Mm-hmm.
But
I like that.
It's still a chapter in the story to share.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
That's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. And our final question, it's for you, Matt, which it is our Phoenix partner question, which today is sponsored by Cunningham Law Firm, who specializes in personal injury, wrongful death, and burn-related questions. So the question for you is, what is one word you would use to describe the burn survivor community?
Inspiring. Inspiring. I'll say it again. Inspiring.
I love that. And I think Jason's a perfect definition of inspiring.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Was there any other final thoughts that you want to share before we close out today? We thank you both for joining us, and we will absolutely put all of the information we talked about on today's podcast, specifically the Courage Rising film, information about how to get in touch with Matt and his team. But anything else you want to share today?
Just kudos to all of you, and we love the Phoenix Society, and we love what you're doing, and we are so appreciative of you inviting us onto this segment today to talk about Jason's case and to hopefully educate or at least provide information to burn survivors or other listeners about what's involved in today's topic, the anatomy of a burn injury case. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. We look forward to talking to you guys soon, and excited to continue season 5 of Girls with Crafts. So thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you